With a sense of supremacy, the extraterrestrial sergeant emerged from his ship, his towering figure glistening in the sunlight. His titanium armor was a monument to technology that was far more advanced than humanity could have imagined, and his keen, angular features twisted into a smirk as he looked around him, taking in the world's delicate species and ridiculous defenses, which made him giggle at the task he was assigned to govern a tiny portion of Earth's land that has perceived as beneath him. But as given instructions, he approached the security office building's entrance. The building's structure was underwhelming. The sign outside and the simple concrete and glass box had seen better days. One man was sitting at a desk with his feet up and a hot cup of coffee in his hand. His outfit was a little to his posture, his far from military grade, and his badge is snugly bent, but he glanced up and grinned casually as the extraterrestrial arrived in the morning. The man mumbled his, "You must be the new sergeant, because your voice lacks any sense of surprise or awe." Smirk deepened. "New fellow, I'm Sergeant Khan, the guardian of the Xerian fleet. As a universal peace treaty enforcer in galaxies, I have eliminated dangers that you call me, the new guy, the guard when I could destroy your world in a matter of seconds. I don't have time to say all that every time I meet you, therefore it's a new guy," he shrugged while sipping his coffee. The man's casual tone truly confused Khan, who tilted his head. "Do you not fear me? Your species is primitive," he said, "and I have weapons in my arsenal." The guard leaned forward and rested his elbows on the desk, threatening to obliterate you from existence before you could blink. "Seems like a lot of work, but hey, welcome aboard if you're here to assist. If you need a place to store your sparkling space armor, there's a janitor's closet over there." Kin's brows narrowed in pride. He had anticipated awe, reverence, and possibly even fear, but instead he was being ridiculed by a man who appeared more focused on his coffee than the intergalactic warrior's appearance. "You can even understand who is in front of you," Khan said in a rising voice. "I'm not. I'm here to supervise security on your planet, to stow armor, and to show what real protection looks like." The guard, who was shorter than Kron, finally up and put down his coffee. Build was far from menacing, but he calmly stared Sergeant square in the eyes. Listen to Sergeant Khan, though, as he mentioned that Earth might not own your high-tech devices or expensive gadgets, but we've managed to get by thus far. Wars and the Kardashians have caused us a lot of trouble, but if you want to prove it, we've been able to hold our own lately. Us how well it's done, but you may be in for a lengthy assignment if you're only here to stare down at us. For a brief while, Khan was held silent by the fact that this man, an ordinary Earth security officer, was treating him like a. Despite their equality, it was frustrating and oddly fascinating. When Earthman Khan eventually asked, "What's your name?" the guard said, "Dave. Henderson, but most people just call me Dave," which is a great way to say Dave Khan. Dripping with contempt, "Show me what security looks like in your charming little world," Dave beckoned for Khan trailed behind him. As they left the office and entered the surrounding complex, it was a modest manufacturing plant that produced unremarkable components for bigger machinery. The sole other guard was sleeping in a chair close to the rear gate. The fences were low, and the cameras were out of date. "This is your current." The defense perimeter requested a gas that was only moderately effective. Dave laughed and said, "Squirrels are a determined squirrel, let alone a hostile force. Surprisingly cunning, but you're right. We don't encounter many problems here." Khan shook his head as he saw some teens attempting to spray paint the walls, and a scumbag in the dumpster. "You are an indolent species that is unaware of the dangers that exist in the shadows. Before you could even sound the alarm, I could destroy this facility and everyone inside if I were your adversary." Dave gave a contemplative nod. "You most likely could. But you're not are you our enemy? Since you're here to assist, why don't you point out our mistakes?" Khan gazed at him, taken aback by the man's effortless acceptance of his own flaws, and he replied, "I will show you, but you won't like what you see." Show you, but you won't like what you see. Over the course of the following hour, Kayron started to draw attention to the facility's weaknesses. His tone shifted between tenaciousness and comprehension. Dave listened intently as he explained how the inadequate lighting created blind spots that were ideal for intruders. Periodically taking notes on a tiny pad while nodding along, "You're taking this rather limited approach, rather." As they concluded their examination, KRON noted that constructive feedback is the key to improving. Dave said, "Aside from that, you're right. We've been slack. But now that you're here, perhaps things will get better." Khan scowled. He had anticipated defensiveness, possibly even rather of fury. He encountered cool practicality. Dave looked at Khan as they made their way back to the office, and he said, "So, Sergeant, you've been to a lot of planets. You know more than you can understand," Khan said. Each one more sophisticated than Dave went on. "Did you ever meet on all those planets in this backwater sphere someone who caught you off guard, or who initially didn't seem like much but ended up being more?" Khan paused. He rarely acknowledged that the majority of species are dramatic. Dave gave a slight smile and nodded, indicating that they follow patterns and expectations. As they arrived at the office door, Khan discovered him playing at his lips, which was excellent to know. Looking back at the facility, he acknowledged that it was not well defended, but there was something about the location and its odd guard that made him uneasy. But Dave's composed manner and unwavering confidence didn't match Khan's expectations of the week's basic creatures. Rather, it seemed as though there was more to him than meet the eye. Khan shook his head, dismissing the idea that humans were. Considering that they were simple creatures, what could possibly make this one unique? Circumstances started to change as an unexpected and novel threat surfaced, upsetting the delicate feeling of pressure on the normally stable surface of the Earth. One of the most ever-accomplished pieces of professional concert exploration, ordinarily, reports began to come in regarding odd disruptions on the edges of the region. Unusual patterns of energy readings started to arise after communication lines were mysteriously severed. Surveillance devices, which the extraterrestrial Sergeant Khan initially disregarded as inconvenient, he believed that there could be no threat from any force in this backward region of the galaxy. But the irregularities' steady increase in severity quickly compelled him to abandon the exercise. Reluctantly, C examined the readings, and the information suggested a structured presence that went much beyond the potential of the technology available on Earth today, as much as he loved the concept. He understood that resolving the issue would necessitate collaboration with people, especially the obnoxious Dave Khan. A security guard approached the situation with obvious contempt, believing he, Dave, however, would have to make up for the obvious shortcomings of humans. Seemed unfazed by the escalating tension, his laid-back manner continued even as, when it grew more difficult to disregard the warning indicators, Kron saw this mindset as naivete, but Dave reminded Kron that he had a KN for keeping things grounded. Panicking wouldn't fix anything, so Kron reluctantly acknowledged that they should stop trying. He acknowledged that time was running out, and when they started collaborating, it was clear that their approaches conflicted at every stage, and Kron mostly relied on technology by using advanced scanning. Tools and models to forecast the mysterious force. Dave's next move relied on experience and intuition in the interim. While Khan carefully examined the facts Dave recommended, simple strategies include monitoring susceptible regions and interacting with residents who may have heard or seen something out of the ordinary. Kron mocked these concepts, calling them outdated and ineffectual. Their relationship was passionate, and Kron chastised Dave for his lack of Dave. then made fun of Kin's strategic depth and incapacity to understand the complexity of extraterrestrial technology. Excessive dependence on technology and his failure to recognize the importance of practical human. Despite their incessant arguments, a peculiar rhythm emerged as they hardly ever agreed on a solution. The three co-founders found themselves striving to lead a life for sales leaders and scientists based on building relationships. Strategy and their combined efforts began to pay off. Dave's boots-on-the-ground method enhanced Kin's analytical techniques by revealing information that would have been overlooked otherwise. As they collaborated, an inconspicuous time suggested that Dave might be more complex than Cohn first thought. Stood recognized for his capacity to adjust to difficult circumstances. He had a remarkable talent for predicting movements and recognizing patterns that were sometimes missed by even Kahn's advanced algorithms when faced with Dave's response to minor disturbances, like sabotage of the facility's power grid, was surprisingly precise. As soon as the issue was swiftly identified and functioning was restored, Kahn started to pay attention, but was too arrogant to publicly acknowledge it. And in the meantime, the danger persisted and it became evident that Boulder was getting closer to the facility and aiming at key systems as the irregularities intensified. That the attackers, whomever or whoever they were well aware of the strategic vulnerabilities of the Kin's trust. Started to falter, but for the first time he kept his doubts to himself. He discovered himself genuinely depending on Dave, whose composed demeanor and unconventional approaches appeared to balance the sergeant's increasing uneasiness. One evening during a stressful troubleshooting session, Dave shared a glimpse of his history as they studied a particularly intricate sabotage attempt, and Dave offered his thoughts on the level of expertise needed to carry out such an act. As though you were speaking directly from the source, the observation was almost too accurate. Experience conarched his eyebrow, wondering how a mere security guy could be so knowledgeable. Dave dismissed the question with a general statement that he had learned a few things over the years, but at this time remained in Colin's thoughts while the irregularities persisted in their tense collaboration. Reached a crucial moment when the primary monitoring hub was attacked. Forcing Kahn and when Dave confronted the criminals head-on, the meeting was risky and chaotic, exposing a very well-organized and technologically sophisticated foe, Kahn, who, despite having all of his advanced equipment and training, found himself outwitted in a number of crucial situations. And, to his amazement, Dave took over, exhibiting exceptional poise under duress and performing maneuvers that appeared to be much beyond the scope of an ordinary security guard. Sin's suspicions increased, but he decided to say nothing. For the first time, he started to say nothing. For the first time, he started to respect the task at hand by concentrating on it. Despite Dave's refusal to publicly acknowledge his assistance, the two were able to repel the assailants, albeit not without a great deal of work, while they regrouped and evaluated the damage. Despite their early interactions, he couldn't get rid of the notion that he was lacking something important in his unusual partner. Friction, a reluctant feeling of respect for one another, started to grow. Technological know-how and analytical skills were crucial in figuring out the attackers' tactics and waiting for their next move while also using Dave's real-world expertise. Together, their capacity to improvise and think quickly filled up the holes left by their Kin's strict techniques. Was incredibly successful partnership, although while neither would publicly acknowledge it, as the situation worsened, KRON began to examine Dave's behavior more closely, as his seemingly casual remarks and deeds suggested a depth of experience that wasn't relevant to his current position. Kahn started to wonder that Dave's quiet manner could be a front for a far more complicated person. Yet the seriousness of the thist left little time for a more thorough examination of the Earthalian-Sergeant relationship. As the security guards' personalities and methods grew to diverge, their joint efforts gradually started to change things. Every encounter with the enemy presented new difficulties, but Kron and Dave managed to overcome difficulties, frequently taking one another by surprise. The partnership wasn't smooth, but it succeeded, Dave said. Khan reluctantly admitted that in spite of his original contempt for Earth's security protocols and its inhabitants, there is no denying Dave's resourcefulness, and he appeared happy to allow Khan to take the initiative when they were unsure. But his nuanced advice frequently proved crucial to their success. As they crafted a build out of Earth's contact in preparation for hooding, as Khan got ready for the next portion of their mission, he couldn't help but think about the odd alliance he had made. There was still a lot about this strange person that he didn't fully comprehend, and there was an increasing feeling of mystery surrounding Hoza. He could not be ignored, but for the time being, they had a common objective, which was sufficient to keep them going. Cone and Dave's tense cooperation persisted, although the tension, as the differences between their opposing strategies grew more obvious, Kin's sophisticated technology and tactical. Despite this, Dave's grounded instincts and surprising problem-solving abilities frequently contrasted with his expertise. As they put together their differences, their combined efforts revealed important information about their common enemy. Evidence showed that the enemy's tactics were not haphazard. They were purposefully prepared and much too accurate for a typical adversary. Kron was forced by this conclusion to examine the attacks in greater detail and with fresh focus. In the meantime, Dave remained unfazed and attacked every task with a composed manner that Kern discovered. There were times when Dave appeared to know exactly what to do, which was both frustrating and confusing. Kern had even devised a strategy, and his reactions were too effective. Cohn's observations were too keen to ignore. Something about Dave failed to account for the man's seeming simplicity, which seemed to be at variance with both his and Callan's biographies. As they resolved yet another situation, this time a suspicion started to grow. Coordinated attack on a crucial communication hub, Dave's actions further demonstrated his covert depth. When confronted with an issue that seemed intractable, Dave came up with a simple fix that not only eliminated the immediate threat, but also revealed a flaw in the enemy's strategy. Chiron took great satisfaction in his analytical abilities, were taken by surprise when he discovered that Dave's techniques, when even conventional behavior, was not haphazard. Rather, it was the result of an experienced individual. Particular advanced experience in circumstances such as these. The Khan started to paid more attention to him, scrutinizing his actions with the same rigor he used for adversaries. He saw how Dave's actions were particularly noteworthy. He maneuvered precisely, seemingly foreseeing the enemy's next move before it occurred. He made use of the facilities it conferred with a swiftness matching his. According to his advertisement, Vantage skillfully established traps and produced diversions that Khan was unable to ignore. As a result of pure coincidence, Chiron was forced to rely on Dave's instincts, yielding to his judgment in the heat of the moment as they gathered and conducted an analysis following the skirmish. After the incident, Chiron couldn't contain his curiosity any longer and asked, with a keenness that provided little opportunity for escape. Dave probed his past directly. He avoided this with his typical lightheartedness, but Cowan noticed a little change in his tone, that Dave's answers were evasive and cautiously avoided details, suggesting that he had touched a sensitive spot. Yet in the meantime, the enemy's attacks just strengthened Cowan's suspicions, became increasingly persistent, and the stakes kept rising, reducing the family's anxiety over Dave's secret past. Urgent need to concentrate on the mission, but the mystery surrounding Dave continued to haunt him. Throwing a shadow over their exchanges, Kron began to doubt everything he believed. He was aware of his partner's identity. Who was Dave in reality? And the reasons behind his skill set that appeared to be far more than what was typical of a security guard. The turning point occurred on a crucial assignment to retrieve crucial information from a compromised facility. When they broke into the premises, they found a heavily advanced tactics and weaponry used by the enemy to fortify their position failed to break. Dave left them at a crossroads, but he came up with a strategy that was both clever and dangerous. and he carried it out perfectly, destroying the enemy's defenses with a degree of proficiency that astounded Khan. Dave could no longer deny it, was concealing something important. Khan confronted Dave again after the mission. This time with Dave's laid-back exterior broke with an intensity that demanded answers, if only. In a brief statement, he acknowledged that his past was more complex than he had previously disclosed. Verified family members' suspicions, the pieces, started to fit together, and Callan began to see Dave in a new light. Was more than just a security guard. He was a person with a past who had witnessed and participated in events that few others could understand. Callan's viewpoint changed when the truth came to light. That Dave's modest demeanor served as a purposeful screen to conceal the burden of his history, which Callan had always taken pride in. The intricacy of the individual he had humbled him based on his ability to read people. Though he still lacked all the answers, it became evident that Dave's abilities and intuition were. They were the outcome of dark, agonizing experiences, rather than being the product of chance. There was further friction in their relationship because of Dave's decision to suppress the revelation. Alliance Khan found himself pondering the depth of Dave's history and its potential implications for their purpose. At the same time, he discovered that he now respected Dave more than he had previously, regardless of the secrets Dave was keeping. They had molded him into a person who could compete head-to-head with a formidable intergalactic sergeant. Accomplishment! The mystery surrounding Dave hung big as they got ready for the next part of their quest. Kron knew that the truth would ultimately surface, and when it did, everything would be different for the time being, even if they were still united by a shared objective. Their tense alliance was reinforced by respect for one another and the implicit understanding that both parties carried neither. When a devastating strike left their facilities severely damaged, Dave reached its breaking point. The enemy had obviously intensified, demonstrating an extraordinary capacity to foresee and take advantage of every vulnerability. Despite his sophisticated technologies and strategic acumen, Khan discovered outmatched. But he couldn't dismiss the persistent suspicion as the smoke cleared and they assessed the destruction. Frustration flared over the possibility that Dave's secret past could be the secret to their survival. Then he went up to Dave once more, demanding to hear the truth. But this time, Dave refused. He appeared to be burdened by the weight of their recent losses and the strain of the growing threat. He acknowledged that he had previously been a member of a select group that had received training for high-stakes missions and cover operations. The abilities acquired through years of experience were not a coincidence. Rather, they were the outcome of a life spent in the shadows, completing tasks that few could fathom. But he continued, with quiet determination. When Dave disclosed that he had been an assassin rather than merely a soldier or operative, Khan was struck by the realization that a bodily rebuke for all his ego and conceit. He hadn't expected this. Dave's modest manner and easygoing disposition had concealed a darker and more perilous history than Khan had believed feasible. The components started to come together because to Dave's tactical accuracy. Kron recognized that this buried chapter of his life was the source of his instincts and his capacity to remain composed under pressure. Realized he had greatly misjudged the man who had supported him during this experience, but the acknowledgement came, Dave clarified, with a disclaimer that he had moved on from that life and was leaving it behind. Violence and bloodshed. He had accepted the position of security guard in pursuit of something more straightforward and peaceful, specifically because it was routine and very different from the mayhem and devastation he had previously experienced. He made the conscious decision to change in an effort to get rid of the ghosts of his past and achieve some sort of atonement. Khan found it difficult to comprehend this information, yet on the one hand, he had a greater regard for Dave's. Yet, he was unable to overlook the consequences of previously having a past assassin as an ally. Khan wondered if Dave's past made him an advantage or a problem, as their relationship was suddenly precarious. He was clearly conflicted, but they had little time to think about the enemy because of how urgent their position was. Reluctantly, Kron admitted that they needed every edge they could obtain as it persisted in pressing their advantage. Thought Dave's story could be their best chance to change things, but he made it apparent that he would be closely observing Dave and was unwilling to completely lower his guard. Dave, for his part, felt Cowan didn't seek understanding or forgiveness in order to comprehend his hesitancy. Instead, he concentrated on the assignment at hand by applying his abilities to strengthen their defenses and predict the enemy's next move as they worked together. Their relationship started to change, and Cal found himself depending on Dave's observations, realizing that even if his own strategies worked, they weren't sufficient to combat the enemy's strategies. Dave's background added a degree of flexibility and unpredictability that Kron was unable to match. Reproduce using just technology, but gradually a fragile trust started to develop via it. Was far from finished. The last turning point occurred during an ambush in which they were outnumbered and outwit. When the enemy's overwhelming might overcame outgunned Kin's meticulously prepared strategies, Dave was the one who intervened and assumed command of the situation with such power and accuracy that there was no space for question. His swift, decisive, and deadly moves demonstrated the entire scope of his training for the first time, and Khan witnessed the transformation. Once a man of controlled efficiency and unwavering focus, Dave was an assassin. The ambush concluded in their advantage, but it came at a price. Seeing Dave in action made Khan Hewitt uneasy because he couldn't make sense of the relationship between the man he had met and the lethal agent he had just seen. But it was a frightening reality that they wouldn't have lived if Dave hadn't stepped in. One that, in the wake of it, made Khan face his own prejudices and presumptions. When their tension eventually subsided, Khan acknowledged that he had erred in passing such a severe judgment on Dave. His conceit had prevented him from seeing the importance of his part-time experience. Dave showed no resentment, merely acknowledged that everyone had their own responsibilities. The discussion signaled a pivotal moment in their collaboration that established the groundwork for a greater comprehension between them with the enemy still near. Khan and Dave doubled down since there was no time to think about the past. Kin's superior technology was the result of their efforts to combine their abilities in ways that neither could have predicted. This strategic thinking enhanced Dave's intuition and flexibility, resulting in a synergy that started to tip the scales. Despite the fact that their collaboration had begun out of need, it was now motivated by respect for one another and a desire to do things differently. As they got ready for the next phase of their mission, they were united in their resolve to safeguard what was most important. Khan cannot help but consider how far they had gone, and how the man he had previously written off as a mere security guard had turned out to be one of the strongest allies he had ever met. And even though Dave's history still hung over him, it was obvious that he had made a different decision, one that Khan was now prepared to believe in. With a shared objective and an unspoken agreement, they stood prepared to face whatever obstacles that lied ahead. Realizing that their odd alliance was more powerful than either of them had anticipated, the high-stakes battle against the enemy that had been hunting them marked the end of their tense alliance. Every time they moved, the attacks intensified, to the point that planning was no longer enough to survive. But of perseverance and pure determination, both Khan and Dave were aware that this would be their only opportunity to eliminate the danger. The strategies they developed over their turbulent collaboration had become a smooth combination of inventiveness and accuracy. Each contributed special talents to the table, and their greatest strength had been their stark distinctions, which they used to fight the enemy. Weaknesses discovered by their joint efforts, Cowan's examination of the patterns of the enemy, its reliance on cutting-edge technology, gave the attack a structure, identified key operational flaws and strategic targets that could compromise their capacity to launch additional assaults. But it was Dave's insight, molded by years of high-press circumstances, that transformed the strategy into a workable plan. His capacity to predict possible issues and adjust on the fly provided a degree of adaptability that CN's strict methodology frequently lacked, as when they carried out the plan, the enemy reacted fiercely, pushing the boundaries of their advanced equipment. Him a substantial advantage, but the attacker's capacity to adjust and thwart his plans compelled him to increase his taking technology to its extremes. Dave instead trusted his gut, and under pressure, his cool-headedness and ability to think quickly to handle the turmoil became the anchor for their work, maintaining their concentration even as things descended into unpredictability. The battle culminated when they broke inside the enemy's military headquarters. They were able to get past multiple defenses thanks to their understanding, but Dave's intuition brought them to the heart of the risk as they went farther. Khan couldn't help but be amazed at Dave's capacity to foresee trouble and identify options. It was evident that his history as an assassin had led to solutions in the most improbable locations, had, in spite of his initial misgivings, heightened his senses to an astonishing degree. In the last showdown, Khan found himself blindly following Dave's direction and putting all of his trust in him, showed that the enemy was a rogue force rather than merely a rogue force, capable of controlling its adversary and focused on its abilities through psychological warfare and technology. As the enemy started to use his own technology against him, advanced systems faltered, and the truth struck home. Was a conflict that required strategy, resiliency, and most importantly, superior equipment to win. Crucially, the flexibility to adjust in this situation, Dave's experience turned into the most beautiful experience of his ability to identify the enemy's calculated strategy. Effort to use his own history to take advantage of predictability and overconfidence, he led Quran through a number of maneuvers that peacefully destroyed the enemy's intentions. It was a delicate balance between attack and defense, and each action required coordination and accuracy. Kin's reliance on reasoning and Dave's instinctive approach was enhanced by statistics, resulting in a synergy that neither had eye on. As the conflict progressed, it became evident that the enemy's relentless strikes would be the price of victory, forced them to go deeper than they had previously, pushing them to their mental and physical boundaries. Sen's pride was formerly a pub. Sincere admiration for Dave's abilities had taken the place of productive teamwork. He no longer viewed him as a lesser companion, but as a peer whose advantages were precisely equal to his own. Dave had the opportunity to demonstrate that his history did not define him. Each choice he made and action he took was a step forward. Redemption was an opportunity to safeguard and preserve the last moments by applying the abilities he had previously used for destruction. The altercation demonstrated their development as a group. With Khan relying on he created a last-ditch attempt to take down the enemy's vital systems using his in-depth understanding of alien technology. Strategy was their greatest chance to neutralize the threat. Dave took the lead in, but it was also risky and needed exact timing. Carrying out the strategy, utilizing his battle background and ingenuity to generate the gap they required, it was a risky gamble, yet their combined efforts made the enemy's operation successful. Fell and the danger was eliminated. The impact of their triumph was lessened by the complex was in ruins, and Dave and Carrion were both responsible for the damage, bodily and psychological wounds from the conflict. Yet there was a feeling of achievement that went beyond the devastation they had endured after facing an opponent who seemed unbeatable. And coming out on top, Khan, who had previously seen the Earth, was victorious not as an individual, but as a pair. Viewing its residents with contempt, he was humbled by the experience and came to understand that strength appeared in a variety of shapes, and human ingenuity and tenacity were not to be undervalued. Dave, who then took solace in the realization that his abilities had served a bigger good than he had faced the evil of his past, and come out stronger, demonstrating that redemption was achievable even in the face of pain. There was no need for extravagant celebrations as they parted ways due to the overwhelming odds. The bond they had formed through hardship, whether through gestures or long farewells, spoke more than words. Khan went back to his tasks with a fresh regard for the world he had before disregarded, while Dave went back to work as a security guard. Even if their paths were unlikely to cross again, he was happy to know that he had changed something. But if a perhaps lasting impression on one another, that triumph wasn't without its lessons for Kalon. Served as a reminder that human courage and intuition could not be replaced by even the most sophisticated technology, and flexibility that characterized Dave's strategy. For Dave, it served as a confirmation of his conviction that everyone might be saved, and that even the most unlikely partnerships may result in anything remarkable together. They had demonstrated that strength was a combination of cooperation, trust, and power. By doing this, they had made sure that the planet would face the future with its head held high, prepared to take on any difficulties that might arise. Ahead,